Hi friends, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com, and today's video is going to be a point of reference for those of you who have asked me, what is a good deck to use if I'm a beginner in tarot? Some of the decks that I'll show you, might surprise you to see. And I'm trying to keep an open mind, so I'm showing a variety of different styles or even studies of tarot, if you want to call them studies. Now, anybody who's been watching my channel for any period of time knows that I was, raised up on the 1JJ Swiss. I've had this deck since the day when it only cost $2, So I've had this deck for a long time. And this was the deck that, introduced me to the world of tarot and kept me enchanted by the world of tarot. In fact, every time I use this deck, I still feel in my body the same initial charge that I felt when I first bought it and used it. Which gets me to the primary point of you have to use what you like, right? No one can tell you what you like. You may really like the artwork of a certain deck. And if you're interested in that deck, you're more likely to pick it up and use it. Now, that's not to say that maybe you won't experiment a little, and maybe you'll buy decks that you're just curious about, and you want to check them out. But ultimately, you will gravitate toward what you like, and neither I or anyone should tell you that the type you end up using or choosing, this, and I guess we can call them schools or like philosophy. I don't know what you want to call them, right? But nobody really can tell you what you like or has the right to discourage you from using whatever type of deck you want to use. Now, I do know a little bit of about decks other than the historic, and Pip style. I mean, certainly for the 47 years I've been reading tarot, there have been so many decks that hit the market, and I was curious about, and I bought a lot of them. My collection is probably over 300 decks. I think I stopped counting around 280. I hope my husband never sees this, although he knows there's no point. But I don't even count, but, and I have become a lot more selective now, because of my interest in tarot and, because tarot history is still being made, tarot decks are still coming out. Now, I have personally put the brakes on some of the more recent decks that are kind of new agey. I really don't have an interest in that, in those kind of decks. So I kind of know myself that I don't really like those. I like what I like, and so will you. Now, if you ask me, because I have an interest, of course, in Pip's non-scenic Pip cards, and they're not all TDM. I mean, the Italian decks are certainly not TDM. Some of them are, that were created for like a French audience or but a lot of the Italian decks, of course, aren't. The oldest decks were not TDM, right? Now, on my website, and I do have to update it because now I would recommend a few other decks, but on my website, when I when students want to take my class and they ask me, what deck should I buy? Because my class is strictly TDM style and or historic Italian or Swiss kind of decks, non-scenic Pips. I will recommend, among others, this one, the Ancient Italian Tarot, because it's gorgeous, and another one of the reasons is because it's inexpensive, and if a person is interested in checking out tarot, they want to check it out. They want to investigate tarot a little bit for themselves, even if they don't want to go into it as a profession. They just want to do their own thing, or they want to have fun with it. I would recommend always a deck that would be affordable, so that if they don't like it, they didn't spend $120 on a deck, right? And, you know, the Ancient Italian Tarot by Lo Scarabeo, it fits that bill. I mean, I think sometimes you might be able to get it for under 20. I think I got this for 19. Certainly you can always get it under 30. And come on, it's a gorgeous deck. Now, you know, it may have some differences, you know, like with the El Bagato, right? He's not like a trickster in this deck. He's not a mountebank in this deck. In this deck, he's like a cobbler, or he's like some kind of artisan, right? Maybe a shoemaker, because we see like what looks like a form of a shoe. And he's drinking wine, right? So, you know, he looks different. You know, you wouldn't interpret this card maybe the way you would, you know, if somebody was a trickster, like a mountebank was, you know, right? But he's also still number one, and, you know, which suggests that he's on the lower rung of society. And he might be somebody who cuts corners in his business. I just mentioned all that because, you know, you do read the deck, right? But come on, look at this deck. It's just gorgeous. And this would be, you know, a good deck if you're interested in maybe a deck that has a historic look, old school appeal, and is affordable, and you don't have to spend a lot of money. And you want to learn, you know, PIP or TDM style cards. I think this would be a fine choice. Now, I also recommend you know, you could get this one. I don't know if it's still available or not, but it's another, you know, affordable deck, or at least it was when I bought this. It has a book, and the book is called Tarot: The Open Reading by Yov Ben. I'm trying to reach it. Well, I won't be able to reach it, but it, you know, by Yov Ben Dov. And I don't know if I said his name properly, but... And it's... We have the mountebank that we're used to seeing. This is a TDM. And like many decks in recent years that are based on TDM, you know, it's a deck that cleans up patterns, you know, to some degree. It's not a facsimile deck, but it honors the tradition. And so if you'd like a deck like that, this one is a good one. As is, you know, as are decks by Artisan Tarot. This is their Conver deck. It's another great option for a beginner if you'd like to use a TDM style deck. Again, you know, it's not a facsimile deck, and it doesn't pretend to be, but it honors the tradition of TDM, and in this particular deck, of Nicholas Conver in particular. Now, this one, you know, it may be a little pricey, you know, probably maybe in the neighborhood of, you know, $50, something like that. And so maybe, you know, you're not interested in spending that kind of money, but there are a lot of mass-produced decks that are just fine. I mean, here we have the Golden Tarot of Marseille. Now, interestingly, this deck, you know, being a Marseille style, has nothing to do with reality. I mean, you'll never find a TDM deck in history with gold foil. You know, it's just not going to happen. But that's what they did. I think this is Lo Scarabeo. Yeah. They put gold on it, and they made it kind of fun, you know. And what the hey? You know, it's not a facsimile deck. So why not? And it's actually very pretty. You know, you see the gold leaf in the background. And in fact, I bought this deck for my grandchildren, each for one of my granddaughters. I bought each of them one of these because I want them to learn TDM. I'm going to show them how to read cards, and I want to attract them, right? And I figure shiny objects might attract them better than not. Let's see what else. Oh, in the department of not spending a whole lot of money, you know, the Tarot of Marseille, based roughly, I think, on the Burdell Tarot. This one is by, I think, Lo Scarabeo, of course. Yeah. You're not going to spend too much money, certainly under $30 anymore. Unfortunately, tarot decks are expensive. And, you know, bear in mind that unless you see photographs of cards, especially with Lo Scarabeo, you may get a deck with a bunch of names on them from different languages. Now, you know, I don't like that trend. I don't know if they've stopped it. I haven't seen it in every deck that they make. Certainly the ancient tarot, ancient Italian tarot, there aren't language, you know, different languages on the cards. The first deck I showed you. And, you know, I would hope to believe that you can commit yourself to learning, oh, that's the Sun card, or, oh, that's the Fool card, to the extent where not only do you not need it in your own language, you certainly don't need it in 6 others, you know. However, it's an affordable deck, and it's a nice deck, image-wise. Yes, definitely of the Swiss persuasion. And if you've ever seen any of my other videos, there are a few cards where you can tell if it's Swiss or not. The 4 of coin is one of them. For me, that's how I can tell. And the batons. You see batons like that. I think there's probably a Swiss influence. And another, I have to pause so I can put some of these decks back in their boxes before they start falling all over the place. I'll be back. Okay, I'm back. Another good one, and one that had been my workhorse deck for a very long time, like years and years and years and years, is the Spanish Tarot by Fournier. Now, it's based on TDM, but it's not, you know, it's certainly by any stretch of the imagination a facsimile deck. In fact, it takes a lot of liberties. I think it's based, let me see, I have a note to myself what it's based on. This is the deck I used, blah, blah, blah. Oh, I didn't make a note about what deck it was based on. I should know it. I used to know it, but for the moment, it's not in my head. But I love this deck, and I've used this deck for a long time. And you know, it's a good little riffle shuffler, and it's still in good condition. You know, in fact, if you're interested, you know, that's another reason why I kind of suggest mass-produced decks, because aside from the fact that they're affordable, especially if you're a beginner and you're not really sure if you're going to be in love with tarot, even if you're like, when you're learning, you tend to be obsessed, right? When I know when I began learning about tarot, I was obsessed. I'm still obsessed, to be honest. But when I began, I was really obsessed. And so I wanted a deck that I could really use a lot, you know. And my 1JJ Swiss, you know, fit that bill for a long time. But, you know, variety is a spice of life. And when other decks began coming to the United States and I was able to get my hands on them, I started buying them, you know. Here's another one, also by Fournier. Fournier has really nice cardstock. I mean, this is another deck. Now, this one might actually be a very nice deck for someone who's learning, because each of the suits is color-coded. And it may help you, you know, distinguish between the suits, or to help you come up with, you know, what gold means to you, right? And also another reason is a lot of times in the beginning, with particularly TDM, beginners will, and sometimes not beginners, I mean, there are a lot of people who should know better, who will say, oh, here's a sword. excuse me, here's a baton, or when they see a baton, accidentally interpret it as a sword. And I'm trying to find a baton, of course. Oh, here we go. Right? So if for no other reason, it will help you keep on track with remembering that, swords are blue and batons are green, so you don't make that mistake. So that might be a good reason to buy this deck. I'm going to pause again. I'll be back. Okay, and moving forward, I'm not going to tell you I'm going to pause, but if you see a pause, that's because I'm putting my decks in the boxes. I didn't actually show you the first deck I had. I mean, most of us are probably familiar with it. However, I want to show you. And you'll notice, at being a Swiss deck, we have Juno and Jupiter in place of the female pope and the pope. And I have a blog article on, what to do about Juno and Jupiter during an interpretation. So I'll put the link for that blog article in the body of this. Because I wouldn't let Juno and Jupiter interfere with using a Besançon style. And this is what this kind of style is called. It's Besançon. It's, and that means that primarily from the Besançon region, that Juno and Jupiter were the replacement, were replacing the female pope and the pope. But it's all otherwise very much in the TDM tradition. And boy, isn't this deck gorgeous? For a first deck, and you can see, obviously the Swiss kind of batons. It was my, as I mentioned on many occasions, it was my first deck. And boy, what a first deck. What a first deck this was. Just, I get tingles when I still use it, for real. It's so beautiful. And I would say with confidence, because remember, Switzerland and Italy are, border one another. You could see a lot of influence of Italian, of Italian sensibilities. Now, if you're reasonably sure, that you really, really, really like, Italians, historic decks, for example, and you're pretty sure it's not a fancy phase, and you would like to get started with a deck that is gorgeous, and quality, then I'm going to recommend or suggest, especially if you have a few dollars to plunk down, that you go to like the House of Il Meneghello, and maybe, get like the Soprafino deck. I'll pull it out and show you. Here you'll see that the Soprafino is a bit similar to what we saw in the Ancient Italian Tarot by Lo Scarabeo. But it's a handcrafted deck, and it's a special deck. It's probably not a kind of deck that you just flop. So you see, we have the same style of, some of the images are very similar, if not identical, but they deviate in certain cards. I think they're loosely based on the same deck, or the other one is based on this deck. I should know off the top of my head, but I don't. But you see, it's a gorgeous deck, And if you're, oh, look at that. If you're sure that you really like the Italian, the historic Italian cards, and you're willing and you'd like to buy a nice, Italian deck, this might be one to go for, especially before they're no longer available. And if you feel that you're more inclined to go for the French variety, like TDM, if you're more attracted to that, and you have a few dollars to invest, more than the mass-produced decks that I've already shown you, I could suggest a Noble. This one is put out by Fleur Noir. again, it's going to cost a couple dollars, but it's not that, considering that it's done by Flournoy, their decks are still extremely affordable. And you can't get much to the source of TDM than with the Noblet, because it's believed that it's the earliest example of TDM that at least survives for us to know about. Artisan Tarot Group also has the Noblet available on their website, so you can get a copy of the Noblet from them. Certainly you can get this one by Flournoy, and you can also check out Peterson. I think his name is Joseph Peterson, but Peterson also has a really nice Noblet deck, and his is more of, not that it's a perfect facsimile, but it's pretty darn close to being a true facsimile deck of the Noblet. Here is the preview copy of the Noblet put out by Artisan Tarot. I don't have the final product yet. It was a Kickstarter. It was a Kickstarter deck, and the decks, I think, are going to be shipped out to us next week. But you can still, I'm sure, I believe it's still available on their website. You can get it for sure. And, like prototypes, if you saw my Conver video I did, comparing their prototype with the final product, this deck will have differences with the deck that actually went to final printing. Like, I know they changed some of the colors because they were a little too much. And the nice thing about the Noblet, no matter whose deck you buy, is that it's a petite, bridge size deck. And that's how it was. I mean, it was a bridge size deck. So it's really nice. I like having bridge size decks. And for that reason, I really like having, a Noblet deck. And this might be the one that I put in my handbag, now, always in a pouch. And then the pouch probably in some kind of zippered case, because I'm very fussy. I don't want anything to happen. So I kind of, triple protect my cards. But it's, this is this has become a workhorse deck for me. Workhorse is a term I use. I don't know if anybody else uses it. But, workhorse decks are decks that I like to use over and over and over without fear of ruining them. The Artisan quality is sublime. The way they shuffle, oh my gosh. Okay, and one more. I'll show you another, two more. If you really want, like I said, if you're really attracted to the TDM style, and you'd like to have an art quality deck rather than, a mass-produced deck, then there are other options. Now, I tend to prefer like the Swiss versions of TDM a lot of times. And this one is another one by Il Meneghello. Now, a lot of people don't care for this because it's got a high gloss lamination, but it doesn't bother me, and you can see the Swiss kind of batons there. It's clean lines. I think it's a beautiful deck. I think there's like a neoclassic, and then there's a classic. Let me see what this one is exactly called. This one is the Tarot Marsilio Classico. And they have another one that's, I have it, but I think it's the neoclassic the other one I have. I'm not sure if this is the only classic Marseille that I have by Meneghello, but I think it is. And then we have Yves Renaud. I really want to mention him. He's got beautiful decks in the TDM tradition. Again, under $100, And if you want to invest in a quality deck, you can go to Yves Renaud's site, where I think you can get it right here, tarot, www.tarot-day-marseille-heritage.com. And again, I have a predisposition for the Swiss style decks when it comes to the TDM variants. That's just my personal taste. I love the Gassman. I love the colors. Oh my gosh. I also believe Deviant Moon, I know they do because I have it, has a version of this, the Gassman Tarot. Let me show you the box. Right? Francois Gassman of 1840. And the copy by, I think that was an additional card. Oh, it's a card that was written on. I think the Deviant Moon deck, you know, he purchased, you know, Patrick, what's his name, Valenza, purchased a deck, you know, purchased a copy of the you know, an original, you know, and made photographs of it. So it's as close to a facsimile as you're going to get, you know. But it comes with the warts of the original too, in its present condition. But I don't think it's that expensive. I think it's probably in the neighborhood. Well, tarot is getting very expensive, you know. And I would encourage you to, you know, if you're not sure about how you feel, I would encourage you to keep these finer decks in the memory, you know, the back burner of your mind, but to go with a mass-produced deck like the ones I showed first. Now, some of you may not be attracted to TDM style decks, and of course, you know, what's the other famous deck? Of course, is, you know, the Waite-Smith deck and the many varieties of the Waite-Smith deck. Now, I have a lot of different varieties of the Waite-Smith deck, and that may surprise some of you, but I mean, come on, it's been around forever, and I would be remiss in my learning tarot if I didn't study it, you know, and if I didn't have, you know, copies of it to study. Now, the first Waite-Smith deck I ever bought was not even the Rider-Waite, which was the one that came out in the United States, like probably in 1970 or something like that. The first copy I ever got of the Waite-Smith tradition is the Albano Waite Tarot, and there's so little information about who Frankie Albano was. I, for the longest time, thought it was probably a guy, but I think Frankie was a woman, and I don't know anything about her. I just know that she created this deck with unusual colors, and when I think I got this probably in, let's see, probably in like 1990 or something. 1987. So that's probably when I bought it. Let's see if this gives us any more dates. Printed in Belgium. But anyway, this was the deck, the first Waite-Smith deck I ever bought. And you can see that the colors are somewhat different than typical. But, you know, it is my favorite Waite-Smith. It's my favorite one. And also bear in mind now, you know, it deviates from TDM or Italian, historic Italian decks. You know, this is a period of time when the occultists made their mark. They deviated from what was the typical, or what was the traditional tarot in Europe, which was TDM style, and the Italians, and they, you know, and you'll see Temperance has a rainbow. And they made changes, you know, and like, for example, they elevated Le Bateleur, who was of low rank, right? either a cobbler, like a low ranked, person in society who, didn't have a lot of money, or worse, a mountebank who was a charlatan who went from town to town, trying to rip you off, right? Well, they elevated the first card to be, one of high status, like an individual who is like a magician, which is why they called it magician, you know. But I never subscribed, to, and they subscribed to, astrological and Kabbalistic connections, but I never, I guess it just never appealed to me. My sensitivities and my sensibilities didn't match. It seemed like a forced fit. Please don't send me hate mail. That's just my opinion. And certainly, if this is a style of deck that you're really attracted to, and and if you're attracted to, the philosophy behind it, by all means, get it. One of the things that it did was to switch 8 with 11. And, for me, number 8, for me, 8 is order, right? Lack of chaos. And so I have always associated it with the number 8 suit, which was, justice. Because when you have, law and order, there's a lack of chaos, right? But, they did change the numbering. That is the only change to numbering that they made. And I'll just show you. I mean, everybody knows what Rider-Waite-Smith looks like, or the Waite-Smith deck looks like, but you may not all be familiar with the albino weight. So just showing you. Here is the version that most people are familiar with, and I don't know the date. I got this certainly after I bought the albino or the albano. Let's see if we can get a date on this. I just like to know when to give you an accuracy. Okay, so this was like 91. So this copy would have been 91. So I got this a few years after I got the albino weight. And this coloring is more or less what we're accustomed to seeing with the Rider-Waite-Smith. No rainbow in the temperance card, as we saw in the albino. And let's see if the sun has the squiggly. Yeah, the sun has the squiggly on this one. And it does in the albino, I'm sure. Now, I have taken the liberty of showing a few different varieties of the Waite-Smith deck. And the reason I have, and that I'm spending as much time on it as I am, is because, some people really like the Rider-Waite-Smith, and I can't dismiss it as a good deck for a beginner, because the meanings are just in the pictures. There's nothing really to memorize. I know a lot of people think like they have to memorize meanings, but when you have a deck where every card has a picture on it, including the pips, what's there to study? The practice, that comes into play is making it fluid and making connections. Tarot is about making connections. It's about connecting to your client. It's about connecting to their question. And then it's about connecting the cards to answer their question. If they don't happen to have a question, then you have to come up with, you have to connect the cards to one another so that they're fluid and tell a story, right? these two cards, I'm showing, I wasn't going to do this, but I'm going to do it now. This came out a couple of years ago. If you can still get your hands on it, you might like it. You may try to get it. It's the Pamela Coleman Smith Commemorative set for the centennial edition of the deck. It's one of the kind of boxes that, for me, the more complicated a deck is to open and use, the less likely I am to use it, because I like having access to my decks, and I like having quick, easy access. However, if you believe that you are attracted to the Rider-Waite-Smith or the Waite-Coleman-Smith kind of cards, I would be remiss in not mentioning this deck to you. This commemorative deck came with some beautiful postcards of, this was just and the backs are lovely. It just comes with some additional images of Pamela Coleman Smith's artwork that are not tarot related. And this one is, and it's a postcard. Now, I would never use any of these for a postcard because as a collector, I just keep things nice. And if my descendants want to do anything with it, it's fine. But I'm leaving it for them nice, And then a photograph of Pamela Coleman Smith. It also comes with some spreads, which if you're a beginner is handy, right? Handy to have. So I think it comes with 3 spreads, and then it comes with 2 books. It comes with Arthur Edward Waite's book, The Pictorial Guide to the Tarot, or Key, excuse me. So it's a dense book with lots of information. It's his book. So if you're going to buy a deck, it will behoove you to get the creator's book if they have one. And then this book, which I really enjoyed, is The Artwork and Times of Pamela Coleman Smith. And it was written by Stuart R. Kaplan, and it has beautiful images of her and a real nice introduction to who she was as a person. And I have a lot of regard and respect for Pamela Coleman Smith. I don't use her deck, and it's not my particular cup of tea, but I use it, and I have used it. And there are many, many, many clients, but over the years, but not so much anymore, because now clients who come to me, they like the kind of decks that I use, and I satisfy that. I appeal to a certain clientele after nearly 50 years, but over the years, there have been many people who didn't feel like they were getting a real tarot reading unless they were getting one from Pamela Coleman Smith. So here are, to show you a few different examples, here are 2 cards from the deck I just showed you, the Sun card, and we see the squiggle. I don't know absolutely, but I think that the commemorative deck is the closest that we have to the way the deck came out in 1909. I may be incorrect, but I think that is what I've read. Now, through the years, because the Coleman Smith deck is the cash cow for U.S. Game Systems Inc., and so every number of years, in order to keep the copyright, I think, they change the recipe. So here they came out with a Radiant. Here they came out with Universal weight. Universal, and and then of course the one I just showed you. Now, if you want a copy of the commemorative and you just don't need all that box stuff, or if you can't get your hands on this deck anymore, I mean, I don't know if it's available anymore, but if it's not available at a reasonable price, you can always go the tarot in the tin route, because it is a copy of the commemorative deck, and it's in a tin. And to show you the difference between the big box and the little box, here they are. So the difference really is just size, because the coloring is the same. You don't lose anything by getting this particular centennial deck in a tin. Now, here is a copy of the Radiant, how the sun and the moon look compared to the way they look in the centennial. You'll notice there's no squiggly line in the sun. So there are changes, that have been made, not just the coloration, right? And also we see changes in their Radiant. This one's the Radiant. I'm sorry, this one's Universal, and this one's Radiant. And in the Radiant, they take the letters, the numbers, Roman numerals, they put them above. To fill the gap where the numerals were, they put this line, but the squiggle is not there. So if you do decide to go, the Waite-Smith route, bear in mind that there are a variety of different ways that deck was created. And if you want my 2 cents, I would suggest either going for the commemorative, which is this big one, especially if you're learning and you're a beginner and you just want as much information about the source, the creator of the deck, and the artist of the deck, then this is a good choice. If you don't want all that, then getting it in the petite size of a tin is a great idea. Okay, now, there are lots of other deck creators who came along and created decks with their own artistic, their own images, but based them on the tradition of Waite-Smith. And one of the ones, again, in an unfortunate packaging kind of deal, is the Anna K. Tarot deck. And it's probably one that I'm going to get for each of my granddaughters, because I think it's an easier deck to read, and I'm trying to, when I want to teach my babies, I don't know what their taste is going to be. I don't know what they're going to like, and they may not even like tarot. Oh my God, perish the thought, but it's a reality. And the Anna K. Tarot is, I don't know, it's an option. It's different from the Rider-Waite-Smith, and some people hate it. But I think this deck does a good job in conveying, and conveying the meanings of the cards. I mean, look at that Chariot, right? And it's a good, jumping off point for, even teaching mythology and stuff, well, this is the story of Icarus, and whatever other references you can make. Right? This, shows how sometimes you're at the top, and sometimes you fall from grace, and sometimes you aspire. So I think it's an awesome deck. And, it's got the Fortitude card as the 11th card and not the 8th card, which I appreciate. And I think this is a good option, especially if maybe you're teaching a child, And if you're interested in the Waite-Smith and you're not particularly attracted to that style of drawing, you know, maybe this might be one. And I have so many decks. There's the Cosmic Tarot, which is really beautiful. I don't know if it's still in print or not. Anyway, there's that one. And it comes with its own book, you know, and with bite size, you know, there's not a whole lot of BS, you know, that sometimes you find in books, you know, not a lot of BS. It's all cut to the chase, bite size, sufficient for what, you know, for a starting point. And then it may surprise you to know that I have this deck. Now, I don't know what on earth possessed me to buy the Tarot Illuminati. And I'm not putting it down. I'm not sure what my reason was. I don't know if it was a Kickstarter. I don't know. Oh, it's certainly a Lo Scarabeo product. Again, it's another one of these in these big grandiose books, you know, and I have a chest over there in my room where I house all my really big packaged, you know, tarot decks. A number of my decks are in this apothecary cabinet, you know, where the drawers individually come out. This one has, again, you know, like tuck style boxes. And then this thing behind me over here is beautiful. That is a, what is it called when you do cigars? You know, like a, oh, I forget the name of it. But, you know, it was something that had individual drawers because my husband was a cigar smoker before his wife, me, convinced him to stop. And so it became a great tarot holder, cabinet. And I think those are my only, oh, and I have one more. I have one more place where I keep tarot decks, and that's on the wall up here. So, and I'm out of space. You know, I have one, two, three, four, 5 storage units where I keep my decks, and I'm out of, I need more room, so it's a problem. Anyway, I don't know what possessed me to buy this book. I guess, this deck, I guess, curious about it. It came out. I don't know. It was like kind of like, oh, this is like the new thing to hit. And I just sort of kind of got seduced and bought it. But, you know, it comes with a quality book. If you're interested in, you know, like I said, if you're interested in a deck, you know, it's really great to get a book by the, you know, the creator of the deck. The cardstock to this deck is nothing to write home about. And there's a lot going on in these cards. A whole, you know, I mean, I think this might be like if you're attracted to the art, it might be a really good deck to, you know, meditate on and just get lost in the picture. But I don't know. There's just too much, you know. For me, it's like sensory overload. You know, you either know what the card means or you don't, and you know, like I could see thinking like if at first glance that this is like, you know, maybe temperance or something, or, you know what I mean? Like not like making the connection immediately, or it shouldn't be, it shouldn't confuse, you know. I think I think you should be able to identify the cards readily. I mean, not that these, you know, okay, you can tell that that's strength and all that, but I don't know. And then of course there's that whole Egyptian stuff. I mean, some people are really attracted, you know, to this style. It's like definitely like a computer generated kind of thing. And yeah, I guess you can tell the cards right away. I mean, it's not like you can't, but I don't know. For me, it's just sensory overload. It just is too much for me. So I never really Oh, and it's got like the shiny gold on the sides. So this, may appeal to some people's aesthetics, and I wanted to show it in case it appealed to you. I wouldn't recommend it for a beginner, though. This would not be one I would recommend for a beginner, so I don't even know why I'm showing it. Okay, now, it's not like Edward Arthur Waite's deck is the only occultist that was out there. Certainly, Aleister Crowley's deck, the Thoth deck, is like extremely famous deck. And he isn't the same, didn't embrace the same philosophy as Edward Waite. I'm sorry, I'm just like... but the cards are gorgeous. I mean, some of these cards in the artist that he commissioned was Frida Harris. I believe she was a dame. Oh my God, these cards are so beautiful. But I don't connect with them as far as being connected to the philosophy of the deck. And the associations, that he has with the deck to other things other than number and, suit. But come on, oh, what a beautiful, beautiful deck. So if you're attracted to this deck and you're interested in the teachings of Crowley, I can't even recommend a good book for him because I never took my interest in that direction. But they're out there, I would highly recommend that this is a deck for study, because it's not as simple. But I don't go for the overly complicated. And truth be told, I imagine, you can interpret anything the way you see fit. So there have been times, now I wouldn't do it with a client because I don't want to be an ignoramus, but there have been many times when I've just used this deck and interpreted it in my own way, without concerning myself with, any of the symbols or associations that he has. Because I just think the artwork is so lovely. But, that's just something I would do on a personal level. And for the most part, I don't, I just don't subscribe to it. So I don't really invest too much of my energy in learning about it. And, I know that's unpopular with some people, and I don't mean to disparage anyone who is attracted to this deck, which is why I'm mentioning it, because it is a beautiful deck. Okay, so what if you are generally attracted to TDM, or either one, like TDM or the Arthur Waite tradition, and you'd like kind of like a hybrid deck, then I would really recommend Dame Fortune's Wheel Tarot, and it is a favorite of mine. That kind of bridges both, especially if I have clients who are okay with this kind of deck. And Paul Hewson, who is the creator, has a number of books, on tarot, and he's a historian as well as a deck creator. And just buy any of his books, even if you don't buy his deck, buy his books, even the ones he co-authored, because what a font of information he is. So we have pips that combine, the image of the pips with his own understanding of what they mean. We have like the traditional kind of Italian world card rather than the figure of an individual in the wreath, or the mandala rather, excuse me. So I do like this deck. So if you're interested in kind of both, you know, traditions, Marseille or you know, non-scenic pips, and the Waite-Smith, you might consider this one because it's kind of like a hybrid deck. I love the hourglass for the Hermit. And let me show you some of his books so that if you're interested in this deck, some good resources. Now here's the Paul Hewson book that was written for the deck. And it's it doesn't come with the deck. I don't think there's a box set. You buy the deck and then you buy the book, you know. But if you're going to go this way, I would definitely buy the book. I didn't mention the Fleur Noire book, but this is the book for the Noble Tarot that Fleur Noire put out. Here's another book by Paul Hewson, a great resource, The Devil's Handbook, and I'm so crying that it was damaged. I was reading the book, I put it on a coffee table, somebody came around, bumped into the coffee table, and damaged the book. So that's that. Okay, so now for the decks where if you're like me and you happen to travel a bit, I really like decks that I can just throw in my handbag and not worry about them too much. Or if I'm traveling, I can have a bunch of decks in my suitcase that take up not too much space. Now, regrettably, the tarots in a tin that U.S. Game Systems put out only have 2, which could remotely be considered a TDM, and neither of them really are. This one is Tarot de Maria Celia, created by Eleanor Jim Narcisco. I bought it originally because it was in a tin, and it was the closest thing to a TDM in a tin that I could get at that time, and also because a beloved cousin of mine who meant a lot to me, her name was similar to Maria, what is this called? Maria Celia. My cousin was Maricello. So I thought it was a good omen that the name was similar. Now, I don't like cutesy decks with bug eyes and stuff like that. I loathe them. You know, and this is kind of borderline. But, you know, if I'm traveling and if I'm going, you know, sometimes I go away for 5 or 6 weeks. And I want a variety of decks. You know, I don't want to read from the same deck all the time. So, because I take my business, I do remote readings, you know, so I take my business on the road with me, you know. I have to have tarot decks, so I'll take this one for sure because it's a small one. Another tarot in a tin is the Inversion Tarot, which is roughly based on the Roland Nordic deck of the either 60s or 70s. It's not a TDM, but it is a non-scenic pip. But you'll notice, you'll notice that they make Justice 11 and Fortitude 8. And even though it's based on the Roland Nordic, even Roland Nordic made, you know, Strength 11 and Justice 8. So I don't know why they made the switch. I really don't. Because it's clearly not in the Waite-Smith tradition. And it's not, you know, it's not a true TDM either. I mean, they have pentacles, right? And the daggers, you know, aren't arranged like the scimitars of, you know, of the French suit. But you know, it's a non-scenic pip, and, you know, it's convenient and it's small, and so I take it with me. Now, if you like tins, you know, and I do, and I take all of these decks with me when I travel, and they're not They're not all non-scenic pips. So, you know, you can get the Radiant, which I think I showed you in the larger size. And there might be others, you know, that I just don't buy. I don't have, you know. You can get the Radiant in a tin. I have a bunch of tins in that apothecary drawer. I got a bunch of them. I don't know all the ones I have. The Aquarian, very 70 vibe, if you like the 70s. Interesting backs. Kind of dated, I guess, but a lot of people love it. So you don't have to get the Waite-Smith style, you know, if you're not attracted to it. There are other options. And, you know, like I said, in a tin is a nice way to go, particularly if you're a traveler like I am. And I, in general, just really like small decks. Okay, this one is the Morgan Greer. I don't think I have this one in order, but I guess I do. And also, something that I neglected to mention about the tins is that they're affordable. They tend to cost less than even the less expensive mass-produced decks that are standard size. So they're small. You can definitely get a tin deck under $20. You know, I think, you know, all of these were probably around the $15 or $16 mark when I bought them. And then this one's a bit different, but I want to give the creator a little bit of a shout out, because I think, you know, this deck, some people would say it's not appropriate for a beginner, but then I think it could be argued that it is. The creator is Michael Bridge Dixon. The name of the deck is the Orbifold Tarot. And why it isn't appropriate for a beginner is because it bears no resemblance to a tarot deck that you've ever seen, right? But why I think it is interesting, and I was using it for a brief window of time with my beginners, but it wasn't like some of them struggled with it, so I stopped. But it gives you like an image that kind of vibes with the meaning of the card, you know. And you'll notice that it's all with the color and on the edges. So like the colors are associated with the element. And at any rate, I think in my mind, I thought it was a good way to teach beginners like the energy of, you know, the numbered cards, but it proved to be, you know, a little bit too challenging. But if you like non-traditional and you're willing to learn a tarot system that's unlike the tarot systems that I've shown you, you know, this might be a decent one. And it comes not with a book. I don't know if Michael made a book, but it comes with a pamphlet, which really I think is sufficient because it's pretty thorough. It breaks it down. I don't use it very often. I used it more frequently when it first came out, and when I introduced it to my students to see how, you know, how they would respond to it. Let's see. Now, of course, there's the Atea decks and the early occult decks, and then some of the decks like the Picard, Udes Picard. But I don't think those are for beginners, so, you know, I wouldn't recommend them for beginners, so I'm not even showing them. Now, as far as books, because I think it's really important, if you can't get a book that's associated with the deck that you ultimately choose, and especially if you're interested in learning TDM books, TDM decks, I think this one would be, you know, a really good book to use. It's called The Untold Tarot, and it's written by Caitlin Matthews. And I don't agree, or I wouldn't come up with the same interpretations that she comes up with necessarily, but that's not the point. The point is that it's a really good reference, and it shows a lot of different decks. I own every deck in this book except for one, and the only reason I don't own it is because I just don't like it, But it's a good source for, getting a little bit of tarot history and a little bit of how to interpret those cards. And so it's like a nice mix. Another book, if you're really interested in learning tarot history, tarot history of like TDM, would be this book. Now, this book is a book. It's a real tome, It's Reading the Marseille Tarot by J.M. David. And if you're serious, if you take your interest beyond a casual one, you have to have this book, period. If you're like really interested in TDM. And although it references other TDM decks, its primary focus is on the Noble. And the Paul Hewson books that I mentioned are good sources for TDM. If you're interested in, or not just TDM, but the history of tarot, those two books in particular, the Devil's Picture book by Paul Hewson is a good one, and the history of tarot, A Wicked Pack of Cards is a collaborative book. Ronald Decker, Thierry DePaul's, Michael Dummett, and then it has like a part 2 kind of book. They're both thick. And then we see like Atea inspired decks on the cover here. Gosh, I'm trying to give you what I think are the best resources for TDM, which is what I would, which is where my heart is. But these are, these are just the history in general. It's not going to teach you how to read. This one is more likely to teach you how to read. This one won't teach you how to read, but it'll teach you what you're looking at. Anyway, I have so many books. I just have so many books. I mean, you can ask me what I think of a book if you think of one that I haven't shown. So, if you're interested in TDM and non-scenic pips, in short, I would go for the Italian Lo Scarabeo Ancient Italian deck, or I would go with, an Artisan, TDM, or one of the Fournier decks for, a TDM. If you have a couple bucks to throw into, you're interested, you think you're willing to spend a couple bucks and maybe go for an Il Meneghello, maybe go for a Giordano Berti. I've done other videos on both houses. I think I did a playlist on Giordano Berti's decks and a playlist on, Yves Renaud and also Il Meneghello and Sullivan Hissman's, I can't show every single deck in this video. It's already over an hour. If you're interested in learning about the Waite-Smith tradition, there's only about 3,000 books on that topic. If you have a few dollars to invest in if you have a couple of bucks to invest in the history of the, like the Visconti decks, you might want to get your hands on the tarot cards painted by Bambo by Gertrude Moakley. Robert M. Place. I took this book on the beach one day. It was a mistake because it got kind of messed up. But it's also a good book for, understanding the, symbolism, especially in the occultist decks, the Waite book. I love this book. Oh my God, I love this. This gives you like a really great insight into the Italian decks. Oh, and Farley has a great book. Let me find that one too. For, learning Italian, the history of the tarot, which is, at this stage in our understanding is indisputably an Italian thing. We have, I think, an excellent resource and a cultural history of tarot by Helen Farley. And we have a couple books specifically on the Visconti Sforza and Visconti tarots. This one sanctioned by Dorsini, which, of Il Meneghello. And this one by Giordano Berti, who knows as much about Italian tarot as anyone. I forgot when I was talking about Paul Hewson, another excellent book that he authored is The Mystical Origins of the Tarot. He's probably my favorite. And then some people found this book helpful in trying to learn what tarot is about. And this one is The Castle of Cross Destinies by Calvino, Italo Calvino. Yeah, it's interesting. This wouldn't be the first book I'd say to like learn tarot, but it's an interesting book. So there are a ton of books, and I have another 100 books. I mean, basically, if somebody wrote it, I have it, or I read it. But I think these are the best of the ones that I would recommend and the ones that I have. At any rate, this video is already too long. I hope it's been helpful in helping you decide what is interesting to you, what decks you'd be attracted to, and the resources that are available to you. Until next time, friends, peace and stay well.